Hello, everyone. This is Brandon Matthews with Opus IVS. Just wanted to welcome you to our broadcast tonight here with Marlen Hunter, who's going to be presenting on Toyota. We do have some additional webinars coming up next month as well, which Marlen will give you some details on later. I think we're going to need all the time we can get, so I'm going to hand it right over to him. Thank you again for joining us. Marlen, take it away.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Marlen, one of the 360 techs here at Opus IVS. I specialize in Toyota and Lexus. So tonight we're going to go over Toyota Lexus. We're going to be looking at diagnostics of on the ADAS driver assistance system, ROV codes, and the calibration side of it. Calibration part, we won't spend a ton of time on because for the most part, when calibrations go smooth, you put your part in and you set up your target, everything goes good. What we're going to cover a lot of is when things don't go good, when they don't want to calibrate or just trying to diagnose and go from there. So we'll kind of jump right into it from here. So what are we going over? ROV codes, record of behavior, or also known as vehicle control history. They're important. You're going to hear us mention those a lot throughout this webinar because they are essentially how you diagnose most of the ADAS system. We're going to look at some pattern failures, coding and calibration requirements, and a couple real-world tips, practical examples, and things like that. The first, we'll jump into record of behavior, kind of a brief intro to it. What is it? What is it used for? And I'll show you some examples throughout the training here. So it looks at a lot of historical data, almost like freeze frame, somewhat as detailed. Sometimes it's not that detailed at all. Just kind of tells you, hey, this part's not happy. Here's why. The data can be stored in there for, I've had cars years old almost that had ROV codes from like a previous collision, anything like that. You're also going to use it a lot to diagnose your ADAS driver assistance systems. If you ever had a car where, especially a Toyota Lexus, where the dash was full of warning lights for ADAS, but you had no codes in the system at all, no, powertrain, chassis, anything like that, covers, specific data, because a lot of times you can make a repair, still have an ROV code, and it'll keep a light on even though the car's fixed. So we'll go over, clearing them, how to check those with, the DrivePro 2 and when DrivePro 1 also, and then the times you'll need global texturing as well for this. This is something you'll also probably hear a lot of. You may even get tired of it. When it comes to driver assistance ADAS situations, service information, hands down, is going to be your best friend. A lot of us fix cars over the years. You can look and figure out how to put AC compressor on or a control arm. But when it comes to this stuff, there's a lot of new features, I would say, especially if you haven't done a lot of the Toyota Lexus parts on these cars, that you're only going to find, in the service information, but that will definitely save you a lot of time as far as saying, hey, what in the world's going on? What am I missing here? So we'll start off with using the DrivePro 2 for record of behavior scanning. Here's kind of an example of what the record of behavior codes look like. As you'll see, they start with an X. Also, that's how you're going to find these codes in the service information. The only downside, there's not a lot of help for these codes in the service information. There's not like big, diagnostic procedures or, anything like that. It just kind of gives you a brief, hey, here's what's going on with it. A lot of them are pretty straightforward, as you see where, CAN message error, front recognition camera has dirt on it. The ECU Security Key not registered. That's another big one that we'll cover here as we go through the webinar. So using the DrivePro 2, ROV codes are kind of finicky, if you will, of how you scan them and how you read them. So when you're in your tool, and this goes the same for the DrivePro 1 as well, same kind of setup, you'll go to your ADAS tab, up here at the top. And the downside to ROB is you can't just scan the whole car and get all the ROBs. You do it per system. So for example, this when I went into ADAS, it just went to front recognition camera. And what you'll do from there is you hit utility. So Toyota and Lexus, that's mostly of where you're going to go in and do or change or perform a function on a Toyota or Lexus. Once you click utility, you'll get to this screen. Shows you, what you could do for the front camera, axis adjust, target memory position. But what we're looking for is record of behavior clear. Now, even though this says clear, you will still view the codes before they are purged from the system. So I've had a few customers say, I didn't want to click that because I didn't know if it would just completely clear them out. It won't. It'll let you view them and then clear them. You would click record of behavior here. It'll bring you to another screen, kind of a brief intro. Says this function's used to provide an overview of the behavior codes currently set and give the ability to clear the codes. And again, this is what they look like, kind of like the first slide, but this is actually in the scan tool. And this is all they give you. There's not a lot of, like I said, of like detailed information. Sometimes you'll find like there's a summary, they call it. It'll tell you kind of like freeze frame data, when it's at, what caused it, what time, things like that. When you want to clear them, you just simply click next. It would ask you, hey, are you sure you want to clear these codes? You click yes, and then it just purges them out. If you just want to view them without clearing them on the DrivePro, I cut it off, but in the top right-hand corner, there'll be just an X. You just click that, close it, and that way your codes will still be there in case you need to, show them for, insurance or customer or just for your own documentation. You'll still have them. So that's kind of a lot of this rolls together. That's kind of just a brief of here's ROB codes. Here's how you find them with the DrivePro. We'll cover some more about what they mean, what they do, a little bit further down the line. The next, we're going to kind of talk about when you're going to need GTS, which is Toyota's factory scan tool, global TechStream. It's very similar to our older version of TechStream, except this one is all web-based. They added mostly all new functions for our newer vehicles, 18 to 20 and up is where you're really going to utilize it. But when you would need it, in addition to using a DrivePro, DrivePro 2, DrivePro 1, to perform ECU Security Key, which this topic comes up a lot, and the name is misleading to say the least. It has nothing to do with actual keys or security. What this is doing, it confirms that the vehicle has a new module installed without a prior VIN written to it. So for years, Toyota has let us use modules on pretty much anything except the actual mobilizer system. What we're starting to see now, this kind of come around 2018, 2019, they brought this in for parts like the camera, some of the blind spots. So that way you didn't reuse a part that was potentially damaged from another vehicle just due to the nature of it being a sensitive part. But now we're starting to see them for once you get into 23, 24, even 25s. I've had to do a SRS module, steering angle sensor, all your blind spots, both sides, your camera, your radar, and we're starting to see it on some ECMs. So Toyota is kind of getting away from the used market, which is not new for a lot of manufacturers, but for Toyota, like I said, we've been spoiled for years to go grab an ECM out of another car, stick it in yours, jump 2 pins in the DLC for 30 minutes and fire the car up. So those days in the newer cars are kind of going away. And obviously vehicle specific functions, and I'll dive into that a little bit more here in some slides, mostly of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it using GTS for like configurations, data to look at, things like that. So this here is a screenshot from using GTS. And what we're kind of going over here is back to the ROB code clearing and also more of what it does. As you'll see here, you have 3 DTCs, all kind of saying, I'm missing a message or I'm having a communication problem. That's actually not what's going on. And this is where, like you'll hear me mention service information. Like I believe this car had a front radar replaced. And after the radar was replaced, they said, hey, we're having all these codes. What's going on? We checked the communication system, all that's fine. Kind of stuck on it. So I'll show you here of what Security Key does. So this is after you perform a vehicle health check with TechStream. I skipped the rest of like the logins and everything. This is more of just you log into TechStream GTS. And you just click health check and it does a full vehicle scan. That will show you configurations, if the module needs to be updated. And then also over here to the right, this green bubble where it says ROB, that means the car has an ROB stored in it if you see the green bubble. If you don't see the green bubble, means, hey, there's no ROB stored in this vehicle. After you perform a health check, up here in the top right-hand corner, you see ECU Security Key and it says necessary. So that means, hey, this car needs the ECU Security Key / handshake done to it in order for the module to communicate to the rest of the car properly. And that's where your communication codes come in, because it's saying, I'm talking to this module, but what it's saying is incorrect. But if you look these codes up, they're U codes, just tells you to look at the CAN system. So anytime you put in a new part, especially driver assistance, this is one of the things that trips a lot of people up is they put the part in, they don't know about the security key. Now they're chasing communication codes, which is essentially part of the new module setup. So you'll do a health check, and this you'll need the factory software with. I don't know if any aftermarket scan tools that'll do it yet, because it goes into Toyota servers, and it's kind of an OEM deal. So you'll see where it says necessary up here in the top left-hand corner, which kind of like this vehicle did. And then down here in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little box with a key in it. That's where you'll begin your security key procedure. So you'll click that, and it brings you into the procedure. And not a lot you have to do here. It'll have you cycle the key a few times. You're just following the prompts and doing what it wants. So it'll read the vehicle. And then what it's going to force us to do is it's going to send the data to the server. That's going to confirm, hey, this module has no previous VIN in it, didn't come from another vehicle, and it's new. So you'll click next, send that to the server. This part kind of takes a few minutes. A lot of times dependent on Toyota servers, which they've been kind of hit or miss lately. And also internet connection speeds, things like that can make this go from a few minutes up to 10 minutes I've had it take. And that's really it for ECU Security Key. Even though it causes a lot of problems, here I'll backtrack. It's a very basic function you'll do, but you'll need GTS with that. And again, kind of back to service information. Our early cars, you didn't need much security key for things like the radar or the ECM or SRS module. But if you get anything, ballpark 22 and up, 20 and up, there's a good chance you'll need that. And the reason I keep reverting back to service information, because if, like, for example, for this Tundra, the 23 Tundra, when you look up the front radar installation, down at the end, it'll say, hey, make sure you perform ECU Security Key. The next we'll kind of jump into kind of more of a spinoff of using GTS, calibrating and configurations. Like I said, calibrations won't spend a ton of time on, but I do want to kind of show you guys some of the tools. If you don't have any, if you're interested in seeing how the setup and things go, and when we're going to use configuration and what that actually is. Almost all your modules are going to have to be calibrated after they get done. That's kind of a given, the front radar, the camera, the blind spot, but not all of them will require configuration. It just, back to service information. Just depends on what it wants it to do for that particular part. Module configuration. There's actually a good service bulletin. I should have put it on here. Depending on the vehicle you have, that will show you a complete list of all the Toyota Lexus vehicles that require a module configuration. So what I would compare configuration to is, I would say, similar to like Ford as-built data. Because before we got a module from Toyota, it was ready to rock and roll. You may have had to calibrate it, but it had its software, it's had its hardware. When we're getting them now, they're just kind of blank. So you're having to go in, configure it, and put software and everything, and tell it you're part of this vehicle with this vehicle trim level, and you're a hybrid or you're not a hybrid, etc. Which is, like I said, it's one of those things we never had to do with Toyota, but as we get into these newer cars, it's becoming quite a common thing. So I'll show you a couple examples here, again, using GTS, of doing a configuration. And same thing as security key, we're going to run a health check. Health check is where you do everything module related, or to find anything module related on Toyota and Lexus, for if it needs a programming, if it needs software, whatever it needs, you're going to find in health check. So after running the health check, like, this vehicle had an active noise control module replaced. And we see over here to the right, configuration needed, yes. And see all the rest of the modules say no. But also we don't get any, weird communication faults, things like that we do with security key. And then further down, it'll show you what partner calibration ID numbers it thinks it should see in it, for a software update as well. This kind of comes afterwards, but it shows what it thinks it should be in there. So what we would do is we click yes to do the configuration, and it's more or less just programming realistically. It shows us up here, our current calibration ID is blank. Our new calibration ID should see a set of 2 different numbers, depending on what system you're looking at. And from there, and you kind of, again, you just follow your prompts, you hit program and start. It's going to bring you into software as a part, which is Toyota's version of saying, hey, I'm putting software on your module. Again, basic, programming parts or procedures, I would say. Good battery maintainer, hardwire your connection. You don't want to risk damaging a module because your Wi-Fi dipped out or, something like that. It'll also save, there's a folder that'll be on your desktop once you have GTS. It'll say GTSE software or GTSE folder. It'll save these to a folder, not that you can really use, as more kind of for information, where you can go back and look at what software was installed into the car. If you ever needed it for, history, for, insurance or anything like that, it'll show you, hey, we went from this blank calibration ID to now this correct calibration ID. And then once you finish that, you always kind of want to rerun a health check. So that way you can make sure, hey, your configuration took correct. You see our software update. We went from having a couple calibration numbers, and now we say no. Back in configure, we also say no. So that means, hey, module's been configured, it's been programmed, all the software is there. This module ready to rock and roll. So front radar, we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of the calibration setup and tools needed when you're doing this. I would say between front park sensors and front radar, these are, and cameras, this one is one of the most common ones that you're seeing in the shop, mostly because where it's at. It's in the very front of the car, and it doesn't take an extreme collision to damage this. Somebody could bump into somebody and this thing's damaged, hit a parking pole, whatever. It doesn't mean the core support got pushed into the radiator. Just, it's all plastic cosmetics up there. Depending on the vehicle, again, service information will tell you as well. There's 3 different ways to calibrate and adjust a radar. The first one, being the one that's a little bit the oldest, is the trihedral or the triangle target. Some vehicles will use a flat target, or there's some vehicles you can use the triangle or the flat target on. The other one that's more or less newer, I would say 22, 23 model year cars to see this come in, is the driving adjustment, where you will put the car into a learning mode and you have to drive it anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes through mixed terrain of driving in the city or driving on the highway, letting the radar, pick up those different objects. A lot of times, let's say you're a shop and you don't have any, calibration equipment. A lot of times the driving adjustment will work. Now, downside of driving adjustment doesn't always work. Even in the service information, when you look it up, it tells you, hey, if you perform the driving adjustment and then you drive it at least up to 30 minutes and the calibration still hasn't completed, okay, cool, go back and use your targets and calibrate it. So I would say it's better than 50-50, but the outcome is always there for it to not take it because it didn't see or didn't like what it saw on the drive, or it didn't see enough lines in the road, barriers, things like that. And this is just kind of an insert from TIS showing, what our different adjustments are. And, where you transition to online mode, you go into front axis misalignment reading and front beam axis reading. These are all displayed in GTS, but a lot of these you can also display in your DrivePro or DrivePro 2. But you have to have targets set up for it to do this. The only one that you don't need a target for is obviously for the transition to online. But if you want to get a lot of cars, like mostly, I would say 16 to 18, they would make you do a front misalignment reading before you could do a front calibration. And what that would do is tell the car where the front radar is sitting to make sure it's within the limits to be able to be calibrated. I actually have one I'll show you an example on where that was failing the calibration for lots of reasons, but kind of how it affects the car. This is an example of one of the triangle targets. Actually, Opus, we sell one of these, and I'll go over this more towards the end. I got some more information and tooling on it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a triangular target, trihedral with a laser sitting in the center of it. Each car is a little bit different. There's a specific amount of distance you put between your laser, or between your trihedral, I should say. Sometimes they're angled different directions. Just depends on the car. But just kind of want to get you guys an idea if you haven't messed with any of these yet. And this is an example of one of Toyota's triple targets, where seeing these kind of fade out a little bit. Saw these in a lot of like 16 Lexus 200s and stuff, where it would have you use 3 different sequential targets to do programming. And this is kind of an insert here from the driving adjustment. The concept behind it is, as you can see here, it's showing you, checking the external environment, looking to see, hey, do I pick up the lines? Do I pick up road signs, people, whatever it's looking for. But down here in the second box is kind of the conditions it wants you to drive it in. Outside on a sunny, day, preferably. You want to see that vehicles are present, that other things are present. You don't want to just get on a 2-lane winding road where absolutely nothing is. You kind of want some of those obstacles to be there. And it just kind of goes, like I said, this is all vehicle dependent, but this is just one from that Tundra that we were looking at earlier. And this is down here where it says, after driving the vehicle with all conditions for approximately 5 to 15 minutes, the adjustment will be completed. Now, if the adjustment does not complete, driving for 15 minutes more, change to a different driving route. If it doesn't complete after 30 minutes, use target adjustment. And, bumpy roads, it's kind of picky, but, you kind of want to be on a smoother, nicer road. You don't want to be obviously driving down a dirt road trying to make this thing calibrate, because it's just going to tell you no. Now we're going to move into our front clearance, front sonar sensors. They have lots of names, front and rear. I get lots of calls on these because for years, they have just been your average sensor that's in a bumper, nothing special. You had one broke, you replaced it, plugged it in, had a good day. Now they're using sonar in these sensors. They're using them for a lot of low speed maneuvers and things like that. So anytime the sensor gets taken out of the bumper, let's say you're replacing the bumper cover and you just simply move it from one to the next, it's going to require recalibration. And it's also going to be required, obviously, if it's been replaced, to damage or something like that. Technically, you're not supposed to have to recalibrate them just from removing the front bumper, because you're not changing technically the position of the sensor. I've had some where I just pull the bumper off and do a set of headlights, for an example. I put it back on, and sonar was mad, so I had to go through and recalibrate it. Luckily, the calibration on these are fairly easy. They're pretty straightforward. This is just an example of a digital angle gauge. It's nothing fancy. The only thing like your standard digital angle gauge isn't going to have is Toyota uses kind of like a peg with like a rounded end. And what that does is goes over the eye of the sensor. And what you'll end up doing is, is zeroing out your box, put it on the sensor, and then whatever it reads out, that's what you're going to input into your park assist or clearance warning module. And that's essentially its calibration there. Here's an example of it on the front of a car. You see where it's got like the little peg, your ultrasonic sensor, and your gauge. That just helps keep it centered, because if not, you can kind of manipulate that gauge a little bit, put it in, move it around. I see somebody in the chat just brought it up, because I was going to say I've done the same thing. If you don't have one, you're in a pinch. 1/4 mm or 1/4 inch 8mm socket fits perfect. It goes right in there. I mean, we all have those around. We can't buy the pegs separately, but like I said, if you have a gauge and you have a car you need to get done, it's not textbook, but a socket works great. I've done it lots of times, more than I should probably be proud of. And this would be the same procedure, front or rear. Also, if the clearance warning module gets replaced, you're going to have to go through and shoot the angle on each sensor. Also, if you only replace one sensor, you're still going to have to go through and do all four. It doesn't let you just go in and punch in one. It makes you do all four on the front or all four on the back. So just something to keep in mind. If you replace one, you're shooting them all. Here's another example, just at a different angle with the angle gauge attachment on it, onto the ultrasonic sensor. And where you would go to do the adjustment. Some of the names have changed depending on the year, but it's usually going to be either under clearance warning, advanced park assist, intuitive park assist, or ICS. The newer cars have changed their names a little bit. Some are still called just clearance warning. Some are ICS. So it just depends, but depending on the year. But when you go in, you're going to go in and do a steering adjustment. And you can do this. You don't have to have GTS to do this. Most basic scan tools and DrivePro tool, they all do it pretty well. Here, sorry, let me backtrack on that real fast. When you go into this, it gives you several options. One of the options will say steering angle replace / battery, front bumper, rear bumper, or clearance warning. Depending on what you've done, you may need to go in and register the bumper type, as you see here. If you're just calibrating the sensors, you don't have to register the bumper type. But if you replace the module, you have to go in and tell it, do I have bumper type 1 or do I have bumper type 2? That's when you'll go in and go to your service information, and it's usually the grill style. It'll say a mesh grill or a honeycomb grill. One will be 1 and one will be 2. You'll put in your bumper type and then run from there. Next up, we got to move into the blind spots. I'd say for me, these are the ones I have the least trouble with, but also these also seem like they have the most problems at the same time. As far as calibrating them, not a lot to do there. You're setting your target up, shooting it, everything's happy, right? Where you run into the biggest problems that I run into is when these cars have been hit in the quarter panel or hit the bumper or somewhere somewhat structural. It depends on the car. Like Highlanders and stuff like that, they put the blind spot module kind of higher up, more like in the quarter panel, versus where you see like a Camry or an Avalon, they'll be kind of down in the bumper. Um, Reason I say these cars have the most problems is, you know, structural damage. It doesn't always get put back exactly right. So the angle of your blind spot monitor can be thrown off, and it's not hard to figure out, but it can throw you for a loop because a lot of people look at it and say, "Oh, well, it looks straight, but it fails every time I try to shoot the blind spot." Well, that's where you'll take your digital angle gauge. Most cars will have a spec. If you look it up, you'll put your digital angle gauge on the front of the blind spot, and it tells you, hey, you're angled up here or down or wherever it's at. It'll give you a spec that it should be in as well. This is just an example of one of the blind spot monitor brackets that tend to get damaged. Luckily, they're semi easy replaceable. Some of them just bolt on, but some of them are kind of steamed to the body. A lot of these get pegged when they get into a wreck, and I mean, we've all tried. I've done it before, where you kind of put a pry bar in it and walk it around, try to shape it back. But at the end of the day, that thing's damaged. This car's relying on this information to be correct. So if you find that something like that is damaged, just put one in it. But I just want to kind of show you guys one of the parts that you can have a straight quarter panel, but a bent bracket, and it'll throw your readings way out in left field. And this is an example here of checking the angle of the blind spot. Same thing again, you're just using your digital angle gauge without the adapter peg on it. And like I said, depending on the car, it'll give you a measurement when you look it up of what the angle should be at. If you're having problems with it, or if you just want to check it after the cars come from a body shop, or if you're in a body shop, to make sure that it's sitting straight, your quarter panels, where it's supposed to be, your brackets where it's supposed to be, everything like that. This is something else I wanted to talk about. I get a lot of. It's a very easy fix, but also very annoying at the same time. Mostly you'll see like on Camrys, Avalons, most of the passenger cars. You'll get the car from the body shop or even from the customer from another shop, and it'll just say rear camera detection, unavailable. For the most part, everything kind of works. You don't really see anything wrong. You just have that message in the dash. So what's going on is, it shouldn't happen every time, but a lot of times after the battery's been changed or the steering angle has been changed, your camera, your center display that has your parking grid lines in it, doesn't know where to go, essentially. So one easy way to tell is you just throw the car in reverse, and you'll see that you don't have any parking grid lines. You just have a blue square that kind of shows the outline of the car. Luckily, this can be done. You don't even need a scan tool to do it, really. You just do it all in the car through the radio. Because these radios will go into like a diagnostic mode. Let's see. So this is the screen of the diagnostic mode. Yeah, you'll have to look it up, or you can sometimes you can put the car in diagnostic mode with the scan tool. Like on this Camry, you hold the audio button on the radio, turn your headlight switch on and off 3 times, and then it brings up this screen. So that's why I say you could kind of literally do it out in the parking lot and not have to pull the car in the bay if you didn't need to. But this will be on your radio display. It'll bring up this screen, and you'll have these options for failure diagnostic, function check setting, service info, and product information. For this, what we're going to be looking at, we're going to go into function check setting, and you'll hit that. It'll bring you into this next screen. Well, you'll have panel and steering switch, touch switch, mic check, GPS, vehicle signal, voice quality setting, and then camera setting. So that's the one that we're going to be caring about. You'll click camera setting, brings you into this screen. And this is where I've had a lot of guys get tripped up, because if you notice your camera detection setting, now this is in black and white, but in the car, it's colored essentially. But your camera detection setting is black, meaning you could click on it but steering angle and back camera setting are grayed out. And if you just tap those, nothing will happen. If you tap camera detection, it'll go into camera settings. What you have to do when they're grayed out like this, you have to hold it for about 5 to 8 seconds. So the one you'd be holding is steering angle settings. So we'd go in and hold that. I said usually 5 seconds does it. And then that'll bring you into our next menu. This is where you are essentially telling the radio, or I say the radio, the navigation unit for the camera, where steering wheel center is, where full left is, where full right is. So what you would do is key on engine off, steering wheel straight. You would hit steering center memorize. So that's going to tell it where dead center is. And then I usually just start to the left. You can go either way, but you go left, full lock, hold it there. Then you hit your max angle steering memorize button. Go full right, hit max angle again, go back to center. And then that's it for that. You cycle the key off, back on, you'll start the car up. Once you put it in reverse, you'll see you now have the red and yellow grid lines. And when you turn the wheel, they'll start sweeping left to right. So essentially all that's telling you is the radio needs to learn where center is, or where the steering angle is. Now, what I didn't show, because you don't get a lot of them, but it does happen, there's some cars that usually have like 360 camera. You'll kind of go through and do the same procedure, but it requires a target board to be behind the car, kind of set up in space like you would for most ADAS. Now that's usually for the higher end model XLEs and things like that. I've probably only done tons of those, but that one you'd have to, again, service information, measure it out, have the target to go in, and that way you can get your 360 camera working as well. All right, so next we are going to kind of go into, this kind of circles back to that truck I'm using for an example. It was a 23 Tundra, where the fellow, they had replaced the radar and, kind of spent days honestly chasing their tail for these communication codes. So this is just kind of to backtrack on that. This is the one here. Sorry, let me back up, because I've got burned on one of these and it took me a lot more time to figure out than it should have. This is just an example. Again, I put in here of saying, hey, security key needed to be done. Like I said, if you don't look up the service information, look at the ROBs, because it'll tell you in there, hey, do security key. And if you're not familiar with that's what we talked about prior. That's where you're going to need GTS. The reason I'm bringing this truck back up again is it wasn't this truck, but the same model year. I had one kind of kick my tail for a little bit. Shouldn't have, but it did. So that truck, the other truck, same 23 model year Tundra, had a U code for a U013787. What it was doing, it was saying a LTA malfunction, visit dealer, and then you would have lost communication with trailer brake control module. I found this TSB, pretty early on. I was like, okay, cool. There's a TSB, reflash the camera and the radar. Drive the truck, everything should be happy. Okay, cool. Easy enough, right? Well, I went in, did a health check on it just to figure out, okay, the radar and the camera have the latest software on it. So why is it looking for a trailer brake? So this is where I should have used my service information a little bit better. What I didn't realize is this truck was not built with a trailer brake control module. Most of the SR grades, not all of them, but depending on how it was built, don't come with a trailer brake control module unless, it was special ordered. Some of the tow packages have them, but all of your hybrids, like 1794s, platinums, all the upper end modules upper end trucks come with the trailer brake control module. So, all right, cool. Long story short, these guys had replaced the camera in this truck. And like I said, it should have clicked sooner, but it didn't. And I spent a lot of time saying, why is this thing looking for a trailer brake controller? And this is kind of where it's hard now to be able to see the truck also. It's because it didn't have one. Long story short, they put the wrong camera in it, or I should say they were sold the wrong camera. Put it in, it calibrated it. It actually worked for the most part. It just, as soon as they went to activate the cruise control, we started getting these codes back. So kind of the message behind that is double check your parts. I've had a lot of wrong model parts. I've had parts that were not destined for the United States, be in a, TMS USA box, but be a part for a car that was supposed to be built in Indonesia or somewhere like that. So like, this example, I spent a lot of time just because I didn't check the part number of the camera because, it took it, it worked, did all the calibrations. Long story short, it had the wrong camera in it. But if you do get them where it has the right camera, it should need just a software update. And this one's another one that's somewhat kind of obvious. Just kind of wanted to touch on it a little bit. This is a local shop I was helping. They had a 22 or 23 RAV4, and they were really kind of beating their heads against it. It had been between, kind of a backstory between a body shop, another shop, and made its way back to them. It kept setting a optical axis vertical misalignment, pretty much saying that the radar was, in this case, was pointing at the sky. It was set at error code 12, which error code 12 doesn't really help you much. It just tells you, hey, check your bumper, check your camera, or excuse me, check your radar, and conditions, meaning make sure your target's set up and set up correctly. So I was helping them out with this, and they put a couple radars on it, things like that. The problem wasn't the radar; it was the car. Come to find out, the thing we put on the chassis machine, it got whacked pretty hard. I will say they did some amazing body work. Everything was straight, but again, I'm not an aftermarket part hater. It just depends on where that part's being put at. The problem here was an aftermarket bumper support, and I'll show you kind of some pictures of it here. Well, this is just showing what the codes that it was setting, and it just kind of tells you, hey, check it, shoot your targets, replace the radar, which, they followed the service information. That's what they did, but there was some outside influence that's causing that. And this picture here, this is what I got before I went and looked at the car. It's easy enough. This thing just bolts to the back of the grill, right behind there, behind the emblem. You have two different mounting options depending on the grill or the bumper. You can get a RAV4 now with an off-road package or without an off-road package. Changes everything. The bumper, the grill, and all that's made different. So a lot of times you can't just mistakenly put that on, but your target height will be set different. I think it's 2.79 and 2.59, if I'm not mistaken, just the difference in height. So I just kind of figured, hey, they got the target set wrong, something like that. But all that was set up right. Long story short, what I didn't see until I got there in person was this piece. That's what your radar is actually bolting to, because in the prior picture, it just kind of looks like it goes on the grill. They had got an aftermarket bumper support, which just kind of goes over up to the core support as well. What I found that this thing was just manufactured incorrectly. It had like I don't even know how to explain it, like a dip in the center of it. So whenever the radar was on it, it was, kind of tilted back. And I'm moving my hand saying it's tilted back. That's extreme, but it was tilted back enough that it thought it was pointing 7 degrees vertical, which it was. Like I said, aftermarket parts, I feel like they have their place. Everything does, but watch what you're using it on, because this, just looking at it next to the other one, looked great until we really pulled them off and inspected them. And it's like, man, you guys put 3 radars on this car and spent a week and a half because, I'm not saying a factory part won't be bad, but, long story short, we got the right bumper piece, put it in, because your tolerance on this was negative 0.5 to positive 0.5. So, the best I got it to was 4 degrees, and that was pulling the bumper loose, bringing it. I've just seen how far I could bring it forward. Obviously, you're not going to send the car on the road like that. You're trying to make something move. But, like I said, just keep an eye out for the parts. This stuff's plastic. It gets stacked in trucks, stepped on, who knows? So just keep an eye out for it there. And next, we're going to kind of go into some of the tooling. I mean, if you guys have done this stuff before, this is, kind of basic run of the mill, but kind of want to show you some more of the Japanese tools, because you kind of get away without needing a full blown, ADAS kit. So this is just an example of the to kind of pick back up on the trihedral that Opus sells. You can have with two different cones, with variable heights. And what I mean by kind of more of a Japanese focus on this, man, if you're a shop who is doing, excuse me, Lexus, Toyota, Honda, Mazda, Kia, Hyundai, you don't need to go buy, if you don't want to, if you don't service them, the whole kit for, the mats for the F-150s and all that. This will do a lot, depending on the car, it's back to service information, to do a lot of the cars that you'll see in the Japanese world, and not just the radars. It'll do some of the cameras, some of the blind spots. As we get into some of the newer cars, we will see that they want a different style target board or, something like that. But if you're just kind of looking to get your foot in the door and, see if it's something you want to do, or if it's something you're already seeing, this is just kind of a cost-effective way of getting radars and cameras and things like that done across multiple lines without having to go in for the full ADAS plunge. Tooling, it kind of goes to no end, really, when you start talking about the rest of this stuff. As you can see here, like in the center, this is a basic stand you can use for sequential targets. Here's a little bit, more involved stand still used for sequential. These two on the left and right, like a John Beam and a Hunter, was like using like a Bosch DAF 3000. Our shop, before I left, it came to Opus, we had the Hunter machine. There's a lot of money. We had every target imaginable, but it all kind of depends on your area, the business, and it worked out for us because we had, I don't know, 6 body shops within a mile who were all fed up with the dealers. Some of their cars will sit there for months. They have insurance breathing down their back. So we got this, and I became overloaded with the amount of ADAS that I could do in a week. So for that example, it was great, but that was a big, big cost, big purchase. And also, I kind of put a picture up here of, our drive state tool, which is more aimed at body shops, but that is a tool that's just designed for doing collision cars. You can still do some scans, stuff like that, but this is what you're going to do: your pre-scans, your post-scans. You're going to submit to insurance, all your calibrations, all kind of, wrapped up in one dedicated tool for calibrations as well. So just kind of wanted to put that out there as an option for other people as well too. All right, so that's kind of be it what we got through tonight. I mean, with ADAS, this is stuff that you could talk about for several hours at a time. So I just kind of wanted to touch on a lot of the basics in case someone hasn't been there before, or getting into like the newer model Tundras, or not Tundras, excuse me, Toyotas and Lexus. So we got a few minutes. If you guys had any questions, comments, or anything like that, you could post them up in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them if you have any. I see Brian saying that sometimes you can put the vehicle in reverse, talking about the rear park camera, turn it full left to right, lock to lock, and sometimes it will take it. And like you said, I've had it go pretty good. But if it won't take it, you go through, do the radio, and go from there. So we use, I can't remember the exact numbers of the question was, did you use the Hunter Bosch system or the new Hunter system? So the one we had, like I said, I don't remember the model number. It was the Hunter Bosch system where we, I think it was Bosch tooling, and then we had a Hunter scan tool, if I remember right. I use it a lot. I should remember, but that's the one that I used. That's been probably 4 years old by now. But it worked pretty well. I haven't used the new Hunter system to kind of see, how that works. Justin asks, when is it highly suggested to clear ROB history? For me, it's anytime I'm doing something mostly ADAS related, because like I mentioned it before, a lot of times you'll get the car in, you'll have, no codes, no lights on, but you'll have ROBs. I've just gotten to the groove of, I do a health check, before after let's say I replace the radar, I do a health check, my programming. After I'm done and I do the calibration, I run a health check again, rerun my ROBs, and then go back and clear them. So I try to clear them out every time. And Jose asked, do you have a year where the new models are required, or it could be any vehicle? I left it kind of broad because 24, 25 model years, almost all of them for sure. 22, you kind of, 21, 22, you're starting to see it. But you kind of just go into it and see, you'll look up the radar calibration and then see, okay, what do I have to do from there? And that'll show you, if it needs to be configured, if it needs ECU security key and whatnot from there. So what is the price of the Opus target tool for radar and blind spot monitor? That honestly, I don't have the correct answer on. What me and Brandon can do is we can get back with you with our sales team and have you send over, have them send you over a price for that trihedral. So Chris asks, when a radar or a blind spot is unplugged as part of a repair, is it required to be calibrated after the vehicle is reassembled? The correct answer is technically no. You shouldn't have to recalibrate it just because you unplugged it. When you should have to recalibrate it is when something changed of its position. That's why I say a lot of times where, like let's just say if you're taking the bumper off because you're doing headlights or something like that and you have to unplug it or move it. Now, if you move it, that's when things may have to be calibrated. But as far as just simply unplugging it because you're replacing a harness or doing something like that, it shouldn't have to be. Reason I say shouldn't, I've had some that just said, hey, I want to be calibrated again. And Brian asked, is there anything with actual labor times for ADAS? Toyota, I haven't looked through it much. Toyota just released something. It's not that great, to be honest, but it's something. Now you have to have GTS to get on the TIS. They have a labor guide now, which they've had for over the years, but it leaves a lot to be desired. It kind of tells you, hey, here's kind of what a labor should be. But then, because, the dealer world, you need an op code to do anything for warranty and things like that. But there's no op codes on it, nothing like that. So it's I don't know if you want to call it a suggestion, but, as far as is an actual like labor guide, not that I know of. And so Jacob, let's see, I missed the first part of the presentation. So as far as ECU Security Key, that'll only have to be done on a new module. Like let's say a new front camera, for an example. That's a one-time kind of module / programming setup. Once you put it in, run the security key, it's on there, it's happy. You don't have to do it again. So just anytime it's a new part. And how often should you perform software updates when the vehicle states an update's available? This has been kind of I wouldn't say a touchy subject, but there's times, I've done this myself where, oh, there's an update, let me update it. But now not so much, because sometimes updates require a parts replacement. And if you look at Toyota, almost all of their service updates for software are related to a TSB. Whether that be for kind of like the Tundra with the tells you, hey, reflash the software for the camera. That's when you would want to do it. I won't say it'll always have it could have an adverse effect, but I've had rare occasions where part replacement was required as part of a service bulletin update, and sometimes people miss that, and then now they reflashed a module that now requires a $1,500 camera to be replaced. But for the most part, you don't really see that because you're your software on that part on these newer ones, it's able to just be updated versus some of the older stuff. It kind of, once it's there, and you're not using it again. And yes, like Thomas mentioned, Honda's now required a security key on many modules as well. I do a little bit of Honda Acura too, and I will say you see almost some of the exact things that we were just covering here, like the security key and configurations. I can't remember exactly what Honda calls it, but it's pretty much the exact same procedure for doing that as well. But yes, correct, they do require that on Honda. And for the last one, let's see here. Richard asked, does Toyota label the modules like Global A or Global B like GM? No, I mean, they kind of do in a way, I guess you would say, depending on the module. It'll say like blind spot A or blind spot B, but as far as telling you like, hey, it's this is a global car, you don't really know unless you get into it or you start looking up the part replacement that it requires. But they just, when you scan it, they just flat out call it, hey, this is pre-collision one, cruise control, radar, camera, blind spot. And in my opinion, Toyota's service information, they leave a lot to be desired. But that's kind of how they do it. So, well, all right, guys, that's going to be everything for tonight. I appreciate you all that stuck around, and hopefully we got something out of it. Like I said, there's a lot to cover in ADAS. Way more than you could do in an hour. So if you ever have any kind of questions, comments, concerns, or you need anything like that, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. Because like I said, we could talk about calibrations for an hour. So I kind of wanted to try to touch on what I could with the time we got. So also on December 9th, we are going to be having another webinar. I don't believe it's posted on the website yet, but it's going to be with our Volkswagen wizard, Tony, doing Volkswagen Audi turbo control and power loss. So kind of a boost session of diagnosing turbos, wastegates, valves, everything like that. Tony, he's one of the best when it comes to Volkswagen Audi. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye on the website, and that'll be posted out here pretty soon. But I appreciate everyone's time tonight. If you guys have any questions, further, let us know, and from there. Thank you.